The wind cut like knives through the empty streets, snow whipping against Angela's face as she raced on her motorbike. Every muscle in her body burned from the cold, her fingers numb inside thin gloves. But nothing mattered except the small shape slumped against the curb. She skidded to a stop, the tires spinning in frozen slush. The boy lay curled up, his tiny frame shivering uncontrollably, lips blue, eyes barely open. Angela didn't hesitate. She threw her bike to the side, ripped off her jacket, and wrapped it around him. The snow soaked through instantly, biting into her own skin, but she ignored it. He needed warmth. He needed life. "Come on, stay with me," she whispered, pressing him against her chest, letting his icy body draw the heat from her own. Her heart pounded as the storm raged, snow piling up around them, the city empty and indifferent. For a moment, she felt the world shrink to nothing but the boy's fragile breathing. Then the massive doors of the mansion burst open, and he appeared. Kenji Sato, the man whose name made even hardened criminals falter, stepped into the snow like he owned it. His eyes widened at the sight, a stranger holding his son like her own life meant nothing. The guards behind him froze, unsure if they should intervene. The storm roared around them, but inside his gaze, there was a silence more terrifying than the blizzard. He knelt, careful not to touch the child, and spoke, slow, controlled, and sharp. "Take her inside. Don't let her leave." Angela's teeth chattered, and her breath clouded the air, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The boy's small fingers curled into her coat, clinging to life. She had risked everything, and now the most dangerous man in the city had seen her. Seen her courage. The guards obeyed instantly, lifting the boy with careful hands, Angela still clinging to him. As they passed under the mansion's grand archway, Kenji's obsidian eyes followed her, unreadable, dangerous, and alive with a fire she didn't yet understand. For Angela, the snow still stung her skin, but something deeper burned inside her, a realization that tonight, she had become a part of a world where every touch, every heartbeat, and every decision carried a weight she had never imagined. And Kenji Sato, the Mafia boss who ruled with ice and shadow, had just declared she would not leave. Angela followed silently behind the tall, silent man who had just declared her indispensable. The mansion doors closed behind them with a final, echoing thud, shutting out the cold wind and the snowstorm. Inside, the warmth was deceptive, measured, and calculated. Every step she took on the marble floor made a faint, deliberate click that seemed louder than it should have been. The mansion was vast, almost impossibly so. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings high enough to lose sight of the top, and mirrors lined the walls, reflecting endless corridors and polished surfaces. Everything gleamed, but nothing invited comfort. It was a world of order, of control, of silent power. Angela's eyes scanned the rooms, artfully placed sculptures, heavy velvet curtains, guards stationed like statues at corners she hadn't noticed. No one looked at her. No one breathed. No one moved unless commanded. Kenji walked ahead, his long coat brushing the floor, his posture rigid. His obsidian eyes rarely flicked her way, but she felt their weight like a physical force pressing against her. Every door, every hallway, every glint of steel whispered a warning, this was not a place for mistakes. Angela felt the chill of fear, and fascination, creep up her spine. She had entered the heart of a kingdom ruled by ice, and the king himself radiated it in every measured movement. "You are aware," he said finally, his voice low and controlled, "that no one in this house touches me unless I allow it." Angela swallowed, tightening her jacket around her shoulders. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely above the echo of her own heartbeat. Kenji's eyes lingered on her, sharp as knives. "And yet, you did. Out there. In the storm." Angela's throat tightened. She wanted to explain, but she knew no words could justify risking her life for a child of a man like him. He turned sharply, leading her into a conservatory filled with exotic plants. Their green leaves brushed against polished floors, but the air was cold and stiff, scented faintly with jasmine. The room was beautiful, almost peaceful, but she felt the danger like a live wire running under her feet. "You will learn quickly," Kenji said, motioning for her to sit, "that in this house, nothing is accidental. Every gesture, every word, every breath is calculated. You are a stranger here. And strangers are expendable." Angela nodded, though her pulse raced. The truth of his words settled into her like ice water. Every step she had taken in her life had taught her to survive. Every instinct screamed that Kenji's world would demand more than courage. It would demand obedience, precision, and an understanding of a kind of danger she had never known. And yet, she could not stop looking at him. The control he radiated, the obsession that gleamed behind his cold eyes, the barely contained fury that made his presence magnetic, all of it drew her closer, even as it terrified her. She had never been seen like this, never mattered to anyone in a world of power and fear. And now, here, in this mansion of shadows, she was no longer invisible. Angela sat stiffly on the edge of the marble staircase, her hands clenched in her lap, while the guards silently closed the doors behind them. The mansion was cold, every surface gleaming and intimidating, but it wasn't the chill of the stone that made her shiver. It was him. Kenji Sato stepped into the room, his black suit flawless, his obsidian eyes locked onto hers. The tension between them was sharp enough to slice. He didn't smile. He didn't raise his voice. But every inch of his presence demanded attention, and Angela felt like a small animal caught in the storm of a predator's gaze. "Why?" he asked, his voice low, controlled, but carrying a weight that made her chest tighten. "Why did you save him?" Angela's throat went dry. "Because, he was freezing. He needed someone. I couldn't just leave him," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know he was your son." Kenji's eyes narrowed, studying her like a puzzle he had never encountered. She was bold. She was reckless. She was dangerous. And yet, there was something about her that made him pause. She hadn't flinched. She hadn't begged. She had acted without fear of him. That defiance, that courage, it stirred something inside him that he didn't like, and couldn't ignore. "You don't understand what you've done," he said, stepping closer. No one touches my family without consequences. You could have died. Do you understand that?" Angela swallowed hard. "I understand. But I also couldn't let him die. He needed me." Kenji's jaw tightened. Part of him wanted to grab her, to shake her for her audacity. Another part, an unfamiliar, infuriating part, wanted to see her again, to feel the fire that had made her brave enough to risk herself. The tension in the room grew heavier, the air charged, as if it had been waiting for this collision. "You're reckless," he said finally, a dangerous edge in his tone. And yet, his gaze lingered on her face, sharp and searching, almost fascinated. "There's something about you I can't look away from." Angela's pulse quickened. She felt the danger, the power radiating from him, but there was also something else, a silent acknowledgement that she mattered now. And for a Mafia boss who controlled everything, that was terrifying. Kenji turned away, pacing a slow circle, his thoughts a storm behind that calm exterior. "You've walked into my world," he murmured. "And I don't know if I should punish you, or reward you." Angela's hands trembled. Every second stretched long and sharp, and the air between them was taut with anticipation. She had no idea what he would do next, but she knew one thing for certain, her life had just changed forever. And for the first time, Kenji Sato, the man who ruled fear itself, didn't know what to do next. The mansion was silent except for the occasional creak of polished floors and the soft whir of the heating vents. Angela sat on the edge of the boy's bed, carefully wrapping his tiny fingers around a warm cup of tea she had made. His cheeks were pink again, but the memory of his frozen lips and shivering body lingered in her mind like a shadow. Kenji Sato stood just inside the doorway, leaning against the dark frame, arms crossed. He didn't speak, didn't move, yet every inch of him radiated control and danger. Angela could feel his presence like a heavy weight pressing against the walls, sharp and commanding, yet somehow, uncertain. He was observing, calculating, but there was something more in his gaze tonight, a flicker of vulnerability she hadn't expected to see. Do you want me to leave?" she asked softly, her voice almost swallowed by the thick, tense air. Kenji's eyes never left the boy. "I don't want you to leave," he said quietly, his voice lower than she had ever heard it. It carried something raw, something unpolished that made her stomach twist. "Not while he's still small enough to need you." Angela felt a strange mix of fear and reassurance. He wasn't saying she was safe, not entirely. But he wasn't telling her to go. And somehow, that was enough to make her stay. For hours, she tended to the boy, changing blankets, brushing stray hairs from his forehead, humming a soft lullaby she had learned as a child. Kenji remained at the doorway the whole time, a silent sentinel. Occasionally, she would catch him watching her, the sharp lines of his face softening in ways that made her heart skip. He looked like a man who was used to giving orders and having his way, yet here he was, helpless in the face of something he didn't understand, compassion. When the boy finally drifted into sleep, Angela sank into the chair beside him, exhaustion pressing down. Kenji stepped closer, moving without a sound, and lowered himself onto the floor across from her. They sat in silence, a fragile understanding threading the space between them. "You made a choice tonight," he murmured, his obsidian eyes catching the candlelight. "A choice that could have cost you everything. And yet, you didn't hesitate." Angela met his gaze, unsure what to say. The power he radiated was overwhelming, but in that moment, it mingled with something unspoken, a need, a weight, a recognition that she had entered his world in a way no one else ever could. Kenji's jaw tightened. "You should be afraid," he said softly. "But you're not. And now? I'm not sure what to do with that." Angela's breath hitched, realizing that the night had shifted everything. The boy was safe. She had survived. But in doing so, she had placed herself directly inside the heart of a man whose world was built on control, fear, and silence. And somehow, he was watching her, not as a boss, not as a predator, but as something far more dangerous, a man starting to care. Morning came slow in the mansion, pale light slipping through heavy curtains and dusting the marble floors. Angela stirred awake to the boy's soft breathing, tucked safely beneath warm blankets. Relief washed over her, fleeting and fragile. The danger outside, she knew, hadn't gone anywhere. It had only shifted, waiting for the right moment. Kenji entered the room without knocking, his presence as commanding as ever. He carried his usual silence like armor, but his sharp eyes softened slightly when they fell on the boy. Angela noticed, but she couldn't allow herself to relax. "Not yet. You should know," Kenji said, his voice low, measured, "that tonight's storm didn't just threaten him. It threatened everything else too. My enemies," he didn't finish, but the weight of what he implied pressed down on her. "They'll see opportunity in my distraction." Angela's heart skipped. She hadn't thought about that. Her decision to risk herself for a child, a small act of instinctive kindness, hadn't just moved Kenji. It had sent ripples into a world built on power, fear, and blood. She swallowed hard, realizing she wasn't just inside his house. She was inside his war. I can't leave now, can I?" she whispered, her voice trembling with the truth she hadn't faced. Kenji's eyes studied her, calculating. "No. Not tonight. Not ever," he said, more to himself than to her. His words weren't an invitation, they were a declaration. Angela tried to steady her breathing, to find some corner of herself untouched by the fear. But then a subtle shift caught her eye, a shadow moving outside the frost-covered windows. A figure lingered among the trees, watching. The slightest tilt of the head, the way they vanished between branches, made her stomach tighten. Kenji noticed too, his expression hardening. He didn't move immediately, but Angela could feel the tension coiling in the room like a spring. "You see that?" he asked softly, voice carrying the weight of menace. "They're already here." Angela's fingers brushed the boy's blanket instinctively, grounding herself. The warmth of him, the fragility she had fought to preserve, made the danger even sharper. She understood now, her choices had consequences far beyond what she had imagined. And the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that had just begun. Kenji's gaze returned to the window, dark and unyielding. "I hope you're ready, Angela. Because the world you stepped into, it doesn't forgive mistakes." Angela felt a shiver run down her spine, part fear, part anticipation. She couldn't leave. She didn't want to. And yet, the first real challenge of her new life had just arrived. Outside, the figure remained, hidden in the shadow of snow-laden pines, waiting for the perfect moment. Angela hardly slept that night. Every creak of the mansion, every whisper of wind against the tall windows, set her nerves on edge. By morning, exhaustion weighed on her like a heavy coat, but the boy's laughter as he played with a small toy on the floor drew her into a fragile calm. She glanced up, and there he was, Kenji, standing in the doorway, silent as ever. "You're staying," he said simply. No argument, no explanation. His eyes, dark and calculating, flicked to her face, searching for any hint of rebellion. Angela froze, the words sinking in. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't just a visitor. She was now part of his world. His inner circle. "Why?" she asked cautiously. Kenji stepped closer, the aura of control around him almost suffocating. "To protect him," he said, nodding toward his son. "And to protect myself. You saw what happens when I'm distracted." Angela nodded slowly, realizing the truth. She wasn't staying for comfort or curiosity. She was staying because danger had followed her inside the mansion, and leaving wasn't an option anymore. Trust didn't come easily between them. Every glance, every gesture carried the weight of suspicion. But beneath that, a strange electricity sparked. Kenji, the man who controlled empires with cold precision, and Angela, a girl who survived on instinct and courage, were beginning a silent negotiation, a push and pull neither wanted to admit. Hours later, as Angela was checking on the boy, a soft noise echoed from the hallway. Faint, almost imperceptible, but wrong. She froze, listening. Kenji appeared behind her without a sound, his presence a shadow she couldn't ignore. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Kenji's hand rested on the hilt of a hidden blade. "Inside the mansion," he muttered. His lips pressed together. "Someone's here. Watching. Waiting." Angela felt a cold pulse of fear. This wasn't the snowstorm outside. This was inside, the walls that were supposed to be safe, now threatened. She and Kenji shared a look, part alarm, part silent agreement. The boy was still in the room, oblivious, trusting them both completely. And in that trust, Angela felt something she hadn't in years, responsibility. Kenji's lips curved slightly, almost imperceptibly. "We'll handle it together," he said. Angela's heart skipped, and she knew he meant it. Not as an ally yet, not as a friend, but as a man who understood danger, and maybe, in the deepest corners of his heart, as someone who was starting to respect her courage. Outside, shadows shifted, waiting. Inside, a fragile alliance was forming, bound by trust, fear, and something neither dared to name. The mansion was quiet, but Angela knew it was only a thin veil. Shadows danced along the tall walls, cast by flickering lights, hiding more than they revealed. She carried the boy carefully down the long hallway, feeling the weight of responsibility press against her chest. Every step was measured, every sound amplified. Kenji followed close behind, his sharp gaze scanning every corner. "Stay close," he instructed, his voice low but commanding. Angela nodded, gripping the boy a little tighter. She had learned one thing already: in Kenji's world, one wrong move could cost a life. When they reached the study, Kenji paused. "They found us," he said quietly. Angela froze, understanding instantly. His enemies weren't just content with striking at him, they were targeting his son. The boy's laughter earlier now felt fragile, like a glass ornament waiting to shatter. Angela swallowed her fear. She may have been small, but courage ran through her veins in ways she didn't fully realize. "We can't wait," she whispered. "We have to move him." Kenji's eyes flicked to her, a mixture of disbelief and growing respect in their depths. For the first time, the Mafia boss wasn't just calculating strategy, he was seeing her as something more than a delivery girl. She was part of the fight. Suddenly, a sharp metallic click echoed from the hallway behind them. A trap. Angela's instincts kicked in. She dove toward the boy, shielding him with her body just as the floorboard under Kenji's feet gave way, swinging a hidden blade. He barely leapt back, the metal missing by inches. Heart racing, Angela glanced at Kenji. His jaw was tight, eyes hard, but there was a flicker, an almost human flicker, of admiration. "You're fearless," he muttered, his tone low but not entirely without warmth. Angela's chest tightened. Fear and pride twisted together inside her. The moment passed as quickly as it had arrived. Guards swarmed, securing the mansion's perimeter. Angela held the boy, checking him over, while Kenji's presence loomed beside her like a dark sentinel. There was no praise, no gratitude yet, but Angela felt it in the way his hand hovered near hers, not touching, just acknowledging. The threat outside was real. Ruthless enemies were circling, waiting for the slightest weakness. Inside, two unlikely allies, one hardened by power, one hardened by survival, stood side by side, ready for whatever came next. And for the first time, Kenji understood that keeping the boy alive wasn't just about protection. It was about trust, respect, and perhaps, if he dared to admit it, something that felt dangerously like hope. The first snowfall of the night coated the mansion's grounds in a soft, white blanket, muting every sound. Angela stepped onto the balcony, the boy bundled safely in her arms, and let the cold bite her cheeks. Kenji followed silently, his long coat flapping around his boots, his usual calm shadowed by unease. "You didn't have to save him," Kenji said, his voice quiet but not entirely controlled. Angela glanced at him, her eyes steady. "I didn't think," she said simply. "I just did it. I couldn't let him freeze." Kenji studied her, the icy walls around him cracking ever so slightly. "You don't understand," he murmured. "In my world, kindness is a weakness. Letting someone see it could," he paused, running a hand through his hair. "Could get them killed." Angela held the boy closer. "Maybe that's what makes it real," she whispered. "Maybe being human is worth the risk." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Snowflakes fell on Kenji's shoulders, melting slowly, like the small pieces of himself he rarely allowed anyone to see. "I've never let anyone in," he admitted finally. "Not really. Not since, everything. Not even my son." His voice broke, just slightly, and Angela caught the raw edge of it. "I understand loss," she said, her own voice low. "I grew up with it. Alone. Forgotten. But maybe some people are worth letting in." Kenji's gaze flicked toward her, a mixture of awe and hesitation. Angela's heart beat faster, sensing the fragile humanity he had hidden behind the ruthless mask of a mafia boss. For the first time, he looked like a man, not a legend. Suddenly, the boy wriggled in her arms, a small laugh escaping, but it stopped abruptly. Angela's heart froze. She looked down. He wasn't there. Her pulse surged. "No," she whispered, setting her hands out instinctively. The wind whipped around them, carrying the boy's tiny giggle far across the snow. Panic clawed at Angela's chest as she scanned the white expanse. Kenji's eyes widened, his calculated calm gone. "Where is he?" His voice, normally smooth and deadly, trembled for the first time. Angela didn't answer, because she didn't know. The snow hit him, teased them, and for a terrifying moment, the world felt vast and merciless. The boy had vanished, and with him, the fragile trust they had begun to build now hung by a thread. Angela's mind raced, Kenji's silent fury a storm beside her, and the white world around them seemed colder than ever. The night was no longer gentle, it was a warning. Someone, or something, was testing them, and the next move could cost everything. Angela's breath tore through the icy night air as she ran, her boots crunching over the thick snow. Kenji was beside her, moving with the quiet, lethal precision that had earned him fear across the city. The boy's small, muffled cries echoed somewhere ahead, swallowed by the storm. Through the blizzard, shadowy figures darted between trees and piles of snow. Angela's hands shook, not from the cold, but from adrenaline. "There," she shouted, pointing. Kenji's eyes followed instantly, sharp and calculating. Without a word, he surged forward, a predator chasing prey. The enemy was fast, but they hadn't counted on Kenji's obsession. Every step he took radiated control, his presence crushing the panic in the night. Angela struggled to keep up, her muscles burning, but she refused to let fear win. The boy's safety depended on her. A figure leapt from behind a snow-covered boulder, knife flashing. Angela instinctively shoved the boy behind her, and the blade struck the icy ground inches from her hand. Kenji moved like a shadow, the knife caught between his fingers before it could harm anyone. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. They pushed through the storm, following footprints that twisted and disappeared in the deepening snow. The enemy cursed, fired a gun into the air, and vanished into the trees, leaving behind only a crumpled note pinned to a branch. Kenji snatched it, scanning the words, "You cannot protect what is already lost. The game has begun." Angela's chest heaved. Her hands trembled, but the boy was safe in her arms. Kenji's eyes, dark and stormy, flicked to hers. "This isn't over," he said, and for the first time, the weight of his world pressed down on Angela. She had glimpsed danger, power, and chaos all at once, and the reality was terrifying. The enemy had vanished, but the threat lingered like smoke. The note burned in Kenji's hand, a promise of trials ahead, a puzzle they would have to solve. Angela felt it too, the fragile trust they were building could shatter at any second, and nothing about this night would ever feel normal again. Snow fell harder, masking the footprints of the fleeing figure. Kenji and Angela stood side by side, watching the empty darkness, hearts pounding in unison. The child nestled in Angela's arms, unaware of the storm they had survived, but the warning had already been delivered. Someone was out there, and the game had only just begun. Angela had thought the mansion was a fortress, untouchable, untarnished by treachery. She had been wrong. It started with whispers, hushed voices behind closed doors. A missing file here, a door left unlocked there. Kenji's guards were efficient, but someone was slipping through cracks he didn't see coming. Angela felt it first, a subtle shift in the air, a tension that didn't belong. She followed the trail to the study, where Kenji's most trusted aide, Dae-hyun, pretended to shuffle papers. His smile was too smooth, too rehearsed. Angela's stomach sank. Something didn't fit. "What are you doing here?" she asked, voice trembling but firm. Dae-hyun's eyes flicked up, calm, calculating. "I could ask you the same," he replied. But the way he avoided her gaze told her everything she needed to know. Betrayal had a quiet face. Her mind raced. Every enemy encounter, every note, every close call, the pieces snapped into place. Dae-hyun had been feeding them information. And now the child, the boy who trusted her more than anyone, was in danger because of him. Angela's heart pounded. She could run, hide, protect herself, but the boy was her responsibility. She had to act. She moved closer, voice low, shaking with rage and fear. Why? She demanded. Why betray him? Why risk a child's life? Dae-hyun's expression hardened. Power is survival, little girl. You'll understand one day. Angela felt a surge of anger she had never known. She could expose him to Kenji, but what if the enemy acted faster? What if revealing him put the boy in immediate danger? She had to make a choice, one that would weigh on her forever: protect Kenji's empire or protect the child at all costs. She made her decision in a heartbeat. Stepping out of the shadows, she grabbed the file Dae-hyun had been hiding, knowing it contained the proof Kenji needed. Dae-hyun lunged, but Angela's reflexes, honed from nights on icy streets, kept her one step ahead. She threw the papers into the fire, watched them curl and blacken, and shouted, "You're finished." Dae-hyun froze, caught between rage and fear. Angela's eyes never left his, unwavering. The betrayal stung like a blade, but she had chosen the right side. Kenji would know soon. And when he did, there would be consequences that none of them could escape. Angela backed away, clutching the child close. She felt the weight of what she had done, the danger that still lurked. But for the first time, she knew she had a role to play, not just as a stranger in Kenji's world, but as someone willing to risk everything to protect what truly mattered. Outside, the snow fell heavier, hiding the mansion's shadows, and the storm inside was far from over. The night air was sharp and biting, cutting through the mansion like a knife. Angela crouched behind the marble pillar, the child trembling in her arms, his small hands clutching her jacket as though he could hold warmth itself. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound a threat. Kenji moved beside her, calm but deadly, eyes scanning for the enemy she had come to know all too well. "They're here," he whispered, voice low but cold. "Stay close. Follow my lead." Angela nodded, heart pounding. She had faced storms, ice, and betrayal, but nothing like this. The enemy's men swarmed the gates, silent and coordinated, armed and ready. But Kenji wasn't just a man, he was the force behind every legend whispered in the city's dark alleys. He signaled with a hand, and the guards moved, unseen until it was too late. Kenji and Angela worked in silence, a perfect unspoken rhythm. She ducked low, lured one attacker into a hallway, and used his own momentum to toss him into a wall. Kenji disarmed another before he even realized he was in danger, his movements precise, terrifyingly controlled. Angela felt adrenaline burn through her, sharper than any cold she had endured. Every strike she landed was for the child, every dodge a promise she had made in the snow. Kenji's hand brushed hers once, brief, electric, and she felt the weight of their unspoken bond, survival, trust, and something more that neither of them could yet name. The enemy leader stepped forward, a dark silhouette against the stormlit gates, and sneered. "You think you can protect him?" he called, voice dripping with menace. Kenji's eyes narrowed. "I don't think," he said, voice low, controlled. "I know." Angela flung herself forward, drawing the leader's attention just long enough for Kenji to strike. A blur of motion, a calculated move, and the leader fell, stunned, disarmed, defeated. His men scattered like leaves in the wind, their plan shattered, their threat ended. Angela sank to the floor, clutching the child, who looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes. Kenji dropped beside them, heavy and quiet, but for the first time, there was warmth in his gaze. "It's over," he said, almost softly. "He's safe." Angela exhaled, relief crashing over her like a wave. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel it, the triumph, the exhaustion, the bond that had formed through snow, storms, and danger. Kenji's hand brushed hers again, lingered just a fraction longer than necessary, and she felt the unspoken promise of protection and something more. Outside, the city still slept beneath the snow, but inside the mansion, the storm had passed, for now. And Angela knew that no matter what came next, she and Kenji would face it together. The mansion gates swung open to a world that had almost taken everything from them. Kenji and Angela stood side by side, the boy clutching Angela's hand like a lifeline. Outside, the enemy lieutenants lay captured by the authorities, tipped off by Kenji's secret plan. The Serpent Clan's plot had crumbled, and every threat to the family was neutralized. Kenji turned to Angela, his obsidian eyes soft but fierce. You risked your life for mine, for his. The world would have ignored you yesterday, but today, you are everything I will protect, everything I will fight for. Angela's lips trembled with relief and pride. The danger was gone, but the trust, the love, and the bond they had forged in a snowstorm were unbreakable. He bent down and lifted the boy into his arms. And as for our little king, Kenji whispered, he will never want for warmth again. Angela smiled, finally free of fear. Kenji stepped closer, wrapping her in his arms. The cold world outside could rage all it wanted, inside this home, they had one. Together. The camera of the mind lingers on the three of them, father, mother, and child, a family forged from sacrifice, danger, and love. And in that moment, the city could burn, they had found their winter's warmth.